Okay, so this is part two of the recorded lecture. We're talking about debt right now. So we've set up our audit objectives, we've assessed inherent risk, we've evaluated at least the design of control risk, to think about the risk of material misstatement, to come up with at least our initial set of audit procedures. And so, um, and again, the two components there are control testing and substantive testing. So with debt, you know, these are you're not going to have a lot of debt transactions for a given firm, at least not so many that you're going to have to do sampling for the most part. It's costly to go to the debt market and issue long-term debt. It's costly to go to banks and take out mortgages and things. Now, I would see some firms, like a REIT, for example, real estate investment trust company. They might be doing a lot of mortgages, right? To where you might have to do some sampling and do control testing. But for the most part, a lot of times this long-term debt, there's not so many transactions that you have to do a lot of sampling for, which means you can look at each transaction, which means a lot of times your control testing and substantive testing are happening at the same time. Um, you know, and so uh, we, the chapter largely focuses on substantive testing, and so um, we're going to look for uh, a handful of things here as we're going through each one. Let me pull out a little annotation here. And so what's going to happen here, similar to PP&E, right? These um, looking for changes in these accounts is where you're going to focus, because long-term debt as of the end of last year becomes the beginning balance as of this year, right? And so assuming we did an audit last year and we got comfortable with last year's balance, then now this year we're focused on changes. And so what do I need to confirm, right? If there's any disposition, which just means we've paid it off or somehow um, been able to take it off of our books. So we're going to verify anything. So we're going to basically start with last year's work, look and see, okay, what was outstanding, and then if anything, if we're paying down anything or we're getting rid of a note, then we're going to verify that. We'll look at documentation from the debt holder showing it's been paid off. Obviously, we can look at individual transactions. But again, kind of this year-end balance, we're going to prove this by looking at all the changes during the year, right? Um, and so where the misstatement's usually going to happen, again, I mentioned that amortization, we may have an issue with that. There may be an issue with kind of like an incomplete recording, like they don't have all the debt that was recorded, or maybe it was improper in the sense of possibly how it was classified. And so what we're going to look for, we're going to look for those documents and what's going to happen is we're going to have a set of these contracts that become kind of part of the permanent file in the audit work papers, and we're going to be using that permanent file to look for example, the amortization that was supposed to have. So once we get a new debt, for example, we'll look that you do an amortization schedule all the way through, right, the end of it being paid, and that's going to be part of the permanent file. And then each year you're going to just verify, for example, okay, if there are monthly payments, here's the monthly the monthly payment amount, here's the interest that should have gone to interest expense, here's the amount that should have been reduced for principal, and then we can just verify that that was actually took place during the year. If it's new, so that's the first year, and then as we go from year to year, we're just looking to make sure that that amortization was actually recorded correctly. Uh, Another step we can do is confirmations, right? And so we talked about confirmations before with accounts receivable. We're already going to be doing confirmations for cash accounts and other asset accounts with financial institutions. Oftentimes, some of these long-term debts that are through financial institutions might be through the same institution as they have kind of the assets, the checking accounts and investments and things like that. And so that possibly could be part of the same confirmation, or if it's, for example, an institution where we only have debt at, then we would obviously do a separate confirmation related to the debt. And so, what do we care about? We care about when the debt originated, because that starts the amortization, due dates of payments, any unpaid balance as of year end. Excuse me, unpaid balance as of year end, because that gets us to the valuation on the balance sheet, the rates obviously, and have they paid any interest, and then is there any collateral, because collateral needs to go into um, uh, the financial statement notes, because we have to disclose what the collateral was for the debt. That's for regular interest-bearing debt. If it's bonds, then we're going to use that trustee and send a confirmation to the trustee to make sure, okay, here's what we're showing, or what the client is showing is for bonds payable as of this date. And the trustee can confirm that, can confirm the interest amounts, those kinds of things. We can vouch kind of the any new amounts that have been received from the issuance of notes or bonds, right? That's pretty straightforward. That almost is going to be part of the cash receipts process when we're doing cash. We're going to be able to see that. Any payments, again, we can tie that to the repayment schedule. And then if there's any canceled notes, we're going to get documentation from that if notes have been paid. And if any collateral was used to secure the notes, then after those notes have been canceled, what's happening to the collateral, right? So making sure that collateral is still available until the note is canceled is an important part of auditing debt. And then we can do analytical procedures. Again, that's things like focusing on interest expense over average principal. So look at that ratio and how does that look over time. And if all of a sudden we see that ratio go up, right? So what does that mean? It means we have a higher interest expense relative to the amount of debt. Well, that suggests that we might have an issue with an understatement of debt. Let's see if I can write that. Understatement of debt. Ooh, okay. I'm running out of space. Let's see if I can write debt. Debt. D-E-B-T. Okay. So if the ratio goes up, that means the denominator might have gone down. In this case, we're talking about debt. So that's where I would look for a completeness problem, right? Again, using just summary information around the accounts. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here to presentation and disclosure. And so, right, kind of this short-term debt, right? It's an unfortunate acronym. But short-term debt, make sure that that has been classified appropriately, that the current portion of long-term is shown in short-term debt. Looking for any disclosures regard to restrictions for the debt that need to be part of the notes, and then an unamortized bond premium or discount, making sure that that is appropriately presented on the financial statements as well. Okay, so here's an example of a confirmation. In this case, it's a related to a line of credit, and so again, this is a confirmation written on the letterhead of the company from the controller. But again, this would be mailed by the auditor, or if we're talking about a confirmation.com, it would be uploaded by the auditor, right? Managed by the auditor. And so the in this case, we have a line of credit for, it's hard to see, but it's $47 million. It was initiated on May 11th, 2000 and whatever, X2. And they talk about the amount of unused line of credit here. So that's basically what's available to the firm. So the difference is this 47 minus 9. That should be 26 million, right? So they had 19. No, that's some terrible math. 28 million. And so, sorry about that. So that's amount that they've used. That's amount they've shown should be showing as debt. But you have to disclose this full 47 million because that's what's available. Talking about an interest rate, and then this is an example of. Oops, sorry, kind of crossed out the controller. Um, this is what the return would look like, where they're sending it to the CPA firm, and they're going to note any exceptions below. And so this is an example of where a loan officer is basically saying, yeah, this agrees, because we're asking, is there any other debt that we're not aware of, right? So that'd be an example of a confirmation. So when are we going to do kind of the audit of debt? A lot of times, because there's not a lot of transactions, we often wait till after the balance sheet date, because if we're thinking about our primary concern is completeness, last thing we want to do is do some work during the year and then all of a sudden they take out some debt, the last 2 weeks of the fiscal year and then don't record it, right? Because we ultimately are trying to do this unrecorded liability test, because again, completeness is our focus. And then making sure also that they're complying with the provisions. And you can't really test compliance until you have the full year information, right? I mean, a lot of these ratios aren't going to be available, aren't going to be finalized until after year end. So um, if that's part of compliance, you can't really do this work during the year. It has to be at the end of the year. And again, I alluded to this fact that every time we have a new loan or a new indenture, that's the bond, we're going to put that in our permanent file of our working papers, be able to go back to that from year to year. We're going to pull out kind of all the restrictions. That'll be something we'll highlight in that working paper. And then again, these are the permanent. That's part of the permanent file. Then the working papers are going to basically use that information, and this is where we're going to put in the analysis of the accounts. We're focused on the change. I'm going to use delta there for change, and then obviously focus on interest and discount, the unamortized discount or premium. That's what the current working papers are going to focus on. Okay. All right. So that does it for debt. I'll start a new video here for equity.